It's so gorgeous here. This is my first time in Vermont, so I'm loving it. I heard that the good weather, you guys ordered the good weather for me. So, astrology of 2015 and beyond.
DK, you might need to speak a little bit louder to get over the sound of the air conditioner.
Okay, yeah, tell me if I tend to be soft-spoken, so I will yell. Astrology of 2015 and beyond, yes! And if you're like me and most of the people that I work with, you're kind of like, okay, I've had enough astrology of 2015 already. Like, let's just put an end to that. So why is it happening? What's going on? You know, I spent a lot of years researching 2012, before 2012. And I got really into the Mayan calendar, and I read these various alternative archaeology reports, and some Swiss biologist who cracked the code on the Mayan temples, and like how each level of the temple represented a world. And actually, I mean, a lot of what he said, was right on. But the Native American elders who were coming out and saying this is when everything changes, the December 31st or December 21st or different alternate dates. And then it kind of seemed like nothing happened, right? It's like, well, we went through, kind of like Y2K. Everything's going to shut off, nothing's going to work. And then it's like, well, that one stoplight in Toledo, did blink for a while. And then we go into the last couple of years, and, it's like, wow, okay, this seems, instead of getting better and everybody getting freer, I mean, in a lot of ways it seems like things are becoming more compressed and the economy's, freezing up. So here's my theory. It's worth what you paid for it, as my dad would say. Well, some of this advice I'm about to give you is worth what you paid for it. So we're in this period, though, that's you can go back and historically track the planetary cycles. So, like, Pluto is in about a 280-year orbital pattern. So every 280 years or so, Pluto comes through the sign of Capricorn. Capricorn is the sign of world systems, like the big systems in our society. So healthcare, education, the highway, people that pave the roads, the banking system. And every time Pluto goes through Capricorn, there is a complete revolution in the way that we are organized as a species. So anybody heard of Richard Tarnas's book, Cosmos and Psyche? Mm-hmm. Okay. It's very long. It's like, it basically covers every event that has happened in history in the last 2,000 years and how it correlates to the planetary cycles. But, he shows you over the course of this book, like, here's what happens when Pluto's in Capricorn. Here's what happens when Uranus is in Aries. Here's what happens when, So you can look at the outer planets, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, as these transpersonal forces. So like the inner planets, the Sun, Mercury, Venus. And by the way, for those of you who are not familiar with astrology, I don't feel like the planets are up there sending beams down that are controlling, whether you meet Mr. Right today or not, or, your financial situation. I do believe that, as the Hermetic principle says, as above, so below, or the inner creates the outer, that we have within the soul, and there's somebody here from the Union Institute, right?
Yeah, Sue.
Hi. So you could talk about this better than I could. We may have you answer some questions later. But basically, that within the world soul and within each one of our souls, we have all of the planets. We have everything in the universe, right? So it's the holistic way of looking at the universe. So I have an inner sun, that's what I radiate. I have an inner Mercury, that's how I talk, And luckily we're doing this now and not yesterday. It would come out like I told Laura and Lisa they needed to introduce me as their idiot savant astrologer friend, just in case I got up there and like, well, he's having a bad day, come back next year. So with the inner planets, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, we can work with those in our individual chart, and we can work with those archetypes and usually kind of change the way they express through us. So if my Mercury in my chart is in a really challenged position, I can go to a speaking class. You know, I could take a writing class. I can learn how to think in a different way. And that's going to create, over time, that will create improvement for me. The outer planets, we can't do that with. These are like transpersonal forces that happen to us, and they tend to be experienced generationally. So, if you go back to the last 2 times that Pluto went through Capricorn, the previous time was the 1760s and 1770s. So can anybody think of any big historical events that happened in that time period? Yeah. I think Vermont was really involved, right? Ethan Allen, was that Ethan Allen?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I'm such an American. I like, you know, like, I'm going to Vermont. I think it's up by Delaware or something. Sorry. But I did remember Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys. Yeah, so American Revolution, right? The Industrial Revolution just kicking into full steam in Great Britain and starting to make its way across the world. And if you look at what was happening during that time period, it was a period of major unrest and hardship for a lot of people, right? So even people who lived in the colonies, not everybody wanted to leave their farm, you know, their peaceful farm, and go fight against the British, right? I mean, even if it seemed like a good idea. The Industrial Revolution is great in a lot of ways. It's created the ability for each of us to drive here, right? And to, you know, enjoy this wonderful, healthy fluorescent lighting. But look at what that did to people's way of life. You know, it's like, if you read Charles Dickens or, you know, any of those accounts, it was not a good experience to most people. But on the other side of that period, you know, so what seems to happen during the Pluto and Capricorn periods, and the previous one was kicked off by Martin Luther nailing his 95 Theses to the church door. So this manifesto that said, we don't need a caste of priests or ministers or whoever, you know, this big organization to tell us, you know, to put us in contact with our Creator. We have the right to communicate directly with God or the divine intelligence, whatever you want to call it. Well, again, that was followed by like decades of bloodshed and, you know, all kinds, you know, it's like, but what came out of that, what came out of Martin Luther was what we enjoy today as religious freedom or philosophical freedom, right? What came out of the next period was the principles of the United States of America, you know, that we can self-organize, right? So we're going through a similar period right now, and we're about third of the way through Pluto and Capricorn. So Pluto moved into Capricorn in 2009. He'll be there through 2023. And then another cycle that we're in the middle of, or we're pretty much through this one, but it's still in effect, is the Pluto-Uranus cycle. So because Pluto's orbit is pretty elliptical, it's not a nice, neat kind of figure that you can line up. But basically, the last time that this happened, that Pluto and Uranus were in the kind of challenging aspect that they have been since 2010, and especially in 2012 through 2015, was the 1960s, the mid-60s. So really fascinatingly to me, today, as Mercury is like returning to direct motion, we have two of the shadow archetypes in astrology, Chiron, the wounded healer archetype. And feel free to ask more questions about this, or you can Google Chiron, you know, when you get home. And for some people, this may be a little bit Greek, but Chiron's the wounded healer archetype. He's a centaur. He's like half man, half beast. Was discovered right at the end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s. So right when the kind of principles of one of the major currents of the 60s, that we should go back to the land. We should eat organic food. You know, we should live in a healthy way. We should kind of drop out of the big system, poisonous, toxic things and do our own thing. Chiron was discovered right around the time that all of that energy kicked in. So Chiron, and then the other archetype is called Black Moon Lilith. So does anybody know the Lilith myth from, yeah? Does anybody, when I say that, are some of you just like, what the hell are you talking about?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
The first wife of Adam.
Right. So Lilith was the first wife of Adam. And she was created from the same cosmic stuff that Adam was created from. She wasn't created from Adam's body.
You mean she came before Eve?
Mm-hmm. And Lilith refused to be submissive to Adam. You know, she's like, I'm your equal. You can't tell me what to do. You know, and God's like, patriarchal God is like, no, the man's, well, you know, you can understand why, but he's like, no, the man's better, and you need to be submissive. And Lilith's like, what are you talking about? And she, you know, basically stood up to, and I'm just going to put God in quotes, right? Because that's in that myth, there's a certain way of focusing on what God is. And Lilith was banished from the Garden of Eden, banished from paradise. And she was not very happy about it. She was kind of, as you could imagine. So then God created Eve out of Adam, so that she would know that, you know, this is, again, don't anybody like come and lynch me for this.
Don't throw things, right?
Yeah. So that she would kind of know, they would always know that she was supposed to be in the submissive position or whatever. So one way you can read that myth is that it's about the patriarchy, right? And we're going into maybe the third 2,000-year cycle where the patriarchy has been in place, where men have been considered to be the rulers in a lot of areas of the world. Obviously, in some parts of the world, really still are. So Lilith comes in, and Lilith and Chiron are both hitting the planetary alignment that basically created what happened in the 1960s. Today, which is pretty wild. And then we've got the Sun and Mars, who are in Gemini, like triggering that as well. So things like this don't happen. You know, you're not going to like wake up tomorrow and be like, wow, the patriarchy's over. You know, it's like we're in total balance now. But it's a really interesting moment, you know, for us all to be connecting. Because what the Pluto-Uranus cycle told us, you know, has told us, starting in around 2010 and going through basically this year, a little bit into next year, is that this is the next turn of the wheel from the 1960s. And so what I really want to talk to you about, without getting into any too much more technical stuff, is what do I think that looks like? What do I think we're supposed to do with that? There's a great book called The Aquarian Conspiracy by Marilyn Ferguson that came out, I think, in the early 80s. It was before 1980. There we go. Thank you. Yeah, so before the internet, right? And she wrote this book that said, there is this loosely organized, vast, global, positive conspiracy of people who are connected somehow in consciousness. And even though there's no leader of this movement, even though these people don't even know that most of the other ones exist, they're all working together as some kind of nodal, you know, there's some kind of network that's happening. And what are they working for? To create what we would call the Age of Aquarius. So the ideal of Aquarius, which, and this is another big cycle, but we're basically somewhere between almost in the Age of Aquarius, and this is just literal, it's actual literal astronomy, because there's a process called the precession of the equinoxes, where because of the Earth's wobble, if you looked out at the horizon on the equinox, you can see the fixed stars moving like slowly backwards through the sky. So the last 2,000 years was the Age of Pisces. The next 2,000 years is the Age of Aquarius. And you can ask 10 different astrologers and you get 10 different answers as far as when that either started or is going to start. But the ideal of Aquarius, sorry, this is kind of a conversation we had earlier. The ideal of Aquarius is that everybody gets to do, we're all uniquely gifted, and we're all freaking total weirdos. You know, the people that look the most normal, they're the ones you really down inside, you know. So, but you know, we all get wounded coming into life, right? And we all have like these very personal experiences of our parents or being in school or, you know, having birds talk to you when you're a kid, like whatever it is, we each have this unique way of looking at the world, and yet we're mostly kind of the same. And so the ideal of the Aquarian age says, we're going to recreate society. Aquarius is one of the mental signs, and it's like the universal mental sign. It says, anything that happens, I can create a framework so that makes sense and that fits. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create society so that the people that want to play drums all day, that's what they get to do. And the people who love baking bread, they get to bake bread. And the people who love working in a cubicle, under fluorescent lights for like 60 hours a week, and they get to do that. You probably don't have a lot of cubicles here, I guess.
There's some more now.
So that's what humanity is trying to move into. And this may all sound a little woo-woo, but if you actually think about it historically, just take the astrology out of it, you can see that back in the age of Taurus, people were very agrarian. Taurus is the bull, right? And in the age of Aries, it was kind of like the height of this warrior chief, kind of energy. In the age of Pisces, the avatar of Pisces is Jesus Christ, who Pisces is like the merging back into the divine, so it's like this immense compassion for everybody, and I love you so much, I'm willing to martyr myself for all of humanity. So you can actually kind of chart these tones of the world as you go through. How do we get into Age of Aquarius? Okay. I better wrap this up, or I'm just going to start going like way out there. I believe that this year is a major turning point. We just finished the last of five seven exact Pluto-Uranus aspects that happened over the last 3 years, starting in 2012. And Pluto continues to be in Capricorn, so this kind of like deep restructuring of the world will continue to go on. But the question is like, how do we take, if we're the next cycle from the 60s, so the 60s was this flashpoint, right, of like, we kind of think of it as like revolutionary, and there's all the psychedelic drugs and the music and everything. There we go. My thread came back to me. What Ferguson said in the Aquarian conspiracy that really made sense to me is she said, at some point the real leaders of the counterculture, they figured out that marching in the streets and throwing stones at the police and setting buildings on fire, they realized it wasn't bringing about the change that they wanted. It's like the system just cracked down harder. And so they started dropping out. And some of them got a lot of flack from the movement for doing that. But they started dropping out, and what did they do? They went to India and learned how to meditate. They went and learned, they went and started practicing yoga. They went inward instead of outward, and they went into the mind in order to understand, like, how do I change myself so that I can actually be worthy of, or resonant with the world that I want to try to bring about. So, you have to be the change that you want to see, right? So here we are, and we're not out there marching against the street. There's the Occupy Wall Street thing kind of like flared up for a little bit, but even that was not violent on the part of the people that were protesting. But I think a lot of us have internalized or understood that, if there's this great hexagram in the I Ching, the hexagram for breakthrough, that says, be careful not to confront evil with force, because when you do that, you give the force over to evil. So if I'm really angry at the government, and I'm just so angry at the government, I'm actually, in astrology, anger is Mars, which is basically directed, focused energy. So it can be anger, it can be assertiveness, it can be willpower, or it can be sports, like I'm running really fast. So when I'm just angry at the government, and I'm like, everybody I talk to is like, the government's so bad, I'm basically strengthening whatever it is that I hate. Okay, so here's the big payoff. You ready? Hope this flies. I feel, and I've been through so many of these phases. I was an angry activist. I was like a, self-flagellating ascetic, not really, but, I went through all the purification, and that was like kind of this big, a lot of what the previous era was about is let's prepare ourselves so we can be ready to do this. Well, this year marks this big energy shift, and I believe that what we are trying to organize as people who are awake or waking up, people who want to be part of the solution, is we've got to start moving into modeling what the new era is about. And what the new era is about is, let's do what we love. Is the way we really change the world is by enjoying ourselves. We don't need a 40-hour work week. There's enough abundance in the world, right? That if we organized it correctly, everybody could have what they needed. Right? There are enough resources in the world to feed everybody on the planet. But what would happen if you suddenly took away the 40-hour work week and told people, hey, you only have to work 6 hours this week? You get like 34 hours to do what you love. What would people do? What do you think most people would do? Go back to work? They'd be mad at the government, right? You took my job away. I hated that job. But that's, with the way we've been domesticated, and these are patterns that go back, thousands of years, is that we don't know what we want to do. And even if we do, most of us don't feel like it's okay to really want to do that. And, if most people would just watch TV and eat a lot of potato chips and, like, I'm so bored. So that's a huge shift, and that's going to take, potentially decades or even centuries to really bring that energy into fruition. But I really feel like the energy is lining up this year and in the coming years. I work with a lot of people from around the world, one-on-one in my daily. That's what I do for work. And I've just seen it over and over where people are, they're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to proceed from a sense of duty or obligation. Like, I've been given a lot, so I need to keep doing this to help. And it doesn't work. It keeps breaking down. And this is, I'm talking to myself too, but then as I've tuned into this, I'm like, well, what would happen if you just, did the knitting that you love to do? And it's just like people they freak out. Like, I can't do what I love. And there's a lot of reasons for that. So if you're creative, if you're an artist of any type, there's a huge societal taboo against being an artist. Anybody here who's an artist of any type, and did you ever hear well, you can't do that for a career? Yeah. You won't make any money, right? Nobody's going to love you. I've had clients tell me that. Well, nobody's going to love you if you're an artist. People know artists are like drug addicts and drunks, and they're always broke. Of course, I've lived that archetype too. What do you call a musician without a girlfriend? Homeless, yeah. But that's the big challenge that I feel like, and I feel like it really is a revolutionary moment. And so, how do we work with that? Well, the ladies who brought me here, we're working on it in our own way, right? And one of the things is basically that we can show up and encourage each other. Hey, that's what you love to do, keep doing it. And so many of us have the experience of every time I've tried to do what I love, something bad happens. I am homeless, or I lose my car, or that happens, and then I have to go back and do a job that I hate even more. And that was under the old energy signature. So we're like a baby who's learning to walk. So if you've ever seen a baby learn to walk, I mean, it's such a feat of learning to coordinate all those muscles, and stand up and balance, and then bam, they fall down, and then they do it again, and bam, they fall down. And so we're kind of in that stage as a species right now, where we're going to fall down a lot and we're going to make mistakes. But I feel like that is sort of the call to, and many people are getting this message, so many people over the world. So the one thing we can do is we can do what we love, and if you're in a position where you can't, you have a day job and it's not what you love, and so you're like, well, I can't do it, I gotta wait until, I'm 55 or till I have saved up. Very Capricorn kind of way of looking at things is like, when I've saved up enough money so that I can not work for a year, And then I've got enough money, so I've got 6 months of job searching and to pay a headhunter so I can get a job that's as good as my old job. Then I'll write my book. And I actually had a client like that. So if we start doing it 5 minutes a day, maybe you can put 10 minutes to it on Fridays or something. But it just, I guess the one thing I want to just exhort you to is that doing what you love is kind of the new revolution. Enjoying yourself in positive, healthy ways. And then the other thing is, because so there's this thing out there that is basically we need support. We need to support each other. So there's this thing out there, you can call it the matrix, you can call it the system. Anybody here seen School of Rock? Jack Black?
Yes.
I love Jack Black for some reason. Crazy Virgo, by the way. But yeah, it's called sticking it to the man, right? So you can call it the man, you can call it the Toltec shamans from Mexico and Central America, called it the parasite. Eckhart Tolle, who probably a lot of you have read, he calls it the global egoic mind. But there's some kind of energy, in the world that seems to be self-organizing and somewhat autonomous that wants to keep whatever the system is, the matrix, in place. And it feeds off of human misery. So this is my view, you can take it for what it's worth, but this is the way a lot of indigenous shamans see it as well, is that there's this global inorganic entity, that controls like the people in society that have the power, and so it's the Illuminati or the whoever they are. I mean, and I always feel like, well, who cares? Because those people aren't in control. Those people are puppets. They're being used by some other energy. But as we push against this and say, we're like a new sprout coming up through the earth in the spring, there's a lot of resistance there. So the other thing that I feel is, the hugely revolutionary act for this next period is that we start connecting in networks. So you're a painter and you've got your day job, but you're trying to keep going with your painting, and you're really visualizing that someday I'm going to be able to make a living, as an artist, and I won't have to do this other job. Well, you really need the support of other people who are trying to do the same thing. You need somebody to be able to see you. So we formed a tribe that we ended up calling the Ravens, and since then, like birds have been it's like Alfred Hitchcock. Birds are everywhere, but it stands for what is it? Realm of
Visionary.
Realm of artists and visionaries evolving the new society.
Yeah.
So pretty, we're not thinking small here, but they're like maybe there are 35 or 40 of us right now, and what we can't, when we started, I mean, I got this message, okay, you got to start this tribe. I'm like, no, come on. It's just like things are just going pretty smoothly. You want me to get weirder? It took me a long time to wrap my head around the astrology thing. I grew up fundamentalist Baptist. And then I was an academic studying like French literary theory, and it's like astrology? Come on. Yeah, but if you're open to it, your path will definitely find you. But one of the things that we realized in the process of getting together and trying to figure out what we were doing together is that what we really need is we need to be witnessed authentically. We need to be able to express ourselves as who we really are and be validated for that. So a lot of the work that I do with one-on-one clients is helping people get unstuck. Because we've all had the experience of you're 5 years old and you I want to be the president when I grow up, and your dad or your mom's like, you'll never be the president, you can't even do your homework or whatever, right? As a kid, it's like, boom, we shut down. And we get that experience, each of us got that experience thousands and thousands of times. So now as adults, when we start feeling like I actually want to do something that I really want to do, I have a dream. These inner children inside of us are like, no, come back, you're going to get spanked again or shamed. So we need people to be able to see that wounded part of us as well and say, hey, Lisa, I see the fact that you're struggling with this. That's okay, because I also see all this beauty that you bring into the world. And, then those people are the ones also who are going to give us the belief that, hey, you can actually, it's like the reasons that we have for not doing what we love are so crazy. If you can actually get out of the wound long enough to look at it, it's just, it doesn't make any sense, right? But it makes sense because that's what we experience. And as a child, we're just feeling it. We're not able to be rational about it. So that's not really like the slam bang ending that I was hoping for, but I see people fidgeting. So, and yeah, I would love to open it to questions, comments, observations. You can challenge anything I said and try to be nice because I'm very sensitive.
This is just really resonating with me a lot. I did a sound balancing session, and pretty much all of this came up for me. So
Wow.
It's really validating now to hear you talking about it.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I witnessed that. And
See, there you go.
Validated.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So many people have maybe once in their lives, and I would say many people not at all, had the experience of somebody that you're not like, that's not trying to get in your pants or vice versa, like actually witnessing you as a full human being. And one of my teachers, there's this guy, Stephen Gilligan, who, do you know Steve Gilligan? He's yeah? Have you been to trance camp?
no.
Okay.
I knew him before he was Steve Gilligan.
Wow. Wow. Cool. He does this thing called trance camp every year in California. And you go out and you it's about how to learn, his kind of hypnotic thing that he's one of the students of Milton Erickson, who was this revolutionary pioneer in what's called permissive hypnotherapy. I remember Gilligan saying, every spirit as it comes into the world, it needs to be witnessed and validated. It needs to be welcomed by the human family, right? Mm-hmm. And most of us don't get that. We come into the world, we get a little bit of that, and then we get banned, Mm-hmm. And it's just, it's no blame. I'm not blaming anyone, right? But then, as adults, it's no wonder that we are so internally blocked, because we don't have that experience of it's okay to be sad, to be afraid. It's even if it doesn't make sense rationally, you are feeling that fear, right? I mean, in one of my personal sessions this morning, we were talking about this feeling, and it's like, well, a feeling is like that tree. How could somebody shame you for that tree? It's like you should be ashamed of being a tree right there. I mean, what do you think growing there? It's like we just have feelings; they arise. But because we all have these different value systems and belief systems, we get told over and over, you shouldn't feel that. Most of us experience that in our adult love relationships too. How could you feel that? How could you feel that way towards people? Oh no, it's just there, right? It's like, I'm not trying to. So, that validating part is really key.